Hi, you're watching Mindshifting Moments, and I'm your host, Margaret Williamson. This show was started because I believe that the best way to gain confidence in our alternatives is by asking questions and getting answers from the creators, from the doers, not just the educators. Today's mind shifting moment question takes us past the top level of benefits of psychedelics in the treatment of opioid and alcohol addictions and the treatment for PTSD and severe depression. And it takes us to an unlikely place, the boardroom. The question today is, can psychedelics, specifically magic mushrooms or psilocybin, help you on your career path? To help me answer that question and share in that conversation today, I have a very special guest, the CEO of the newly formed Beckley Retreats, Neil Markey. And he is such a remarkable person for so many reasons. Hello, Neil. Um,
Hello. Oh, get close there.
One, I was saying you're such a remarkable person for so many reasons, and we'll get to some of those. But coming from sort of the sales field, I know that the easiest way to convert people is through testimony, right? A great before and after pic. But what I love about your story is that you show us that sometimes our before wasn't so bad. That we can be following sometimes the right paths and doing what society has deemed a great career path for us, and it leads us to hit a brick wall sometimes. And that's what we want to talk about today is when we're in that corporate setting and in our corporate lives and we're climbing that ladder and we're experiencing some mental health deficits, how can psilocybin really help us along that path? So hello, Neil.
Hello.
Welcome.
Yeah, nice to meet you.
Wonderful. um, so let's see, where should we start? I think your story is one that is so powerful. And so I would like to unpack it a little bit instead of just kind of giving you the reins. But maybe to start, let people know kind of your experience in the psychedelic industry that brought you to your position as CEO of Beckley Retreats today.
Yeah, sure. Well, 10 years ago, 2012, I got out of the military. I was a captain in the Ranger Regiment, and I did one trip to Iraq and two to Afghanistan. And even though I was actually, one step removed from a lot of the intensity relative to a lot of the soldiers, there was a lot of trauma in the organization. It was, pretty tough years for the Ranger Regiment. And, not only were we losing people overseas and, guys were getting pretty intense wounds, but the mental health was in really bad shape. There was at one point in time, we had 3 suicides in 90 days. So it was intense, and it left some marks on me for sure. And when I got out, I was, although doing well professionally, I was going to a really prestigious graduate school. I had been a highly ranked officer, and I was getting job offers at very prestigious companies like McKinsey and BCG and Bain. I was actually really struggling internally, and I had tried many different Western or traditional, however you want to describe it, approaches like SSRIs and anti-anxiety medications, sleeping pills, and nothing really was making much of a difference. I was kind of still sliding. And the first thing I found was meditation. This man who was getting his PhD at Columbia as well, or along with me, was a long seasoned meditator, and he taught me how to meditate. And then 2012, 2013, I had my first ceremonial use of psilocybin. And that was profound. That was a pivot point in my life. And then from there, I, went on to have quite a few years where I had lots of different experiences with different psychedelics. I was going on lots of different long form meditation programs. I ended up doing a teacher certification in meditation, and you really used plants and well-being practices as a way to, to heal and make myself more well. And then, I went on to have this corporate career and backslid for a bit, and then, got back into it more fully these last few years. And I can kind of go into more detail on any of those
Yeah.
chapters if you'd like.
Yes, so much. The first thing that caught my guard is I come from a military family as well. Both of my parents were U.S. Army. And there's coming from a child from that, it's so good at masking, I think, the mental trauma that happens in combat and being part of the military and the armed forces. And so even though that's not what we're talking about today, I think it's so important to say for all of those kind of soldiers and military families that find themselves struggling with mental illness, how did you then have the courage to like seek help outside of, you know, how you talked about the SSRIs, like the prescription drugs? Like, how did you continue to seek help? Like,
Well, I mean, honestly, I got to a bit of a rock bottom. I mean, I got to this low point where, you know, I had achieved a lot and was doing well on paper, but there was times when I didn't want to live anymore, and that like scared me, and I kind of looked out of desperation.
yeah.
And yeah, and I was really, I mean, it was a gift. I was fortunate to kind of serendipitously meet this man that taught me meditation, and meditation has been the most transformational thing that I think I've done. And then like through that, through the people I got connected through meditation practice, you know, the plants were quite profound too, and I would say accelerated some of the journey. But so I would say it was out of desperation, but sometimes there is some beauty, I guess, in like kind of hitting a bit of a rock bottom. It forces you to look. I think the real tragedy is sometimes you see people not living at their fullest or kind of getting by, but it's not bad enough to really have to make change. And you can do that for decades, right? And then that's really a shame when you finally kind of realize that you've been living well below your potential and then could have done something about it.
Right. Or that many of us might find that we feel like we're trying to take action to get better, right? We're going to see the doctors, we're taking the pills and the drugs that they're prescribing to us, but yet we're still experiencing those feelings of hopelessness, of discouragement and depression. And so I think a lot of people find themselves there too, right? Like, I'm doing everything that they tell me to do, and I'm not experiencing the benefits. There must be something more wrong with me, right? Instead of looking at it and saying, no, there might be something wrong with your medicine. Right.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of where, you know, we talk about it from, right, those big case studies, right? We know that veterans, and I would love to have another conversation about that. But today I want to take it, you know, from the theater of combat to kind of the theater that most people find themselves in every day, where they do have to go out into public. We have to go out into these offices, into a corporate environment, and, you know, we don't want to keep just putting on a mask, right? We don't want to just kind of keep going through the motions. And like you said, it all looks great on paper, but behind the paper, inside of us, things are off, right? And so tell me about then, you went through this physical trauma, right? That embodied itself in mental trauma, and you were able to find meditation, which led you to psilocybin, and then took you into a corporate path. Now you've worked your way up a corporate setting. You talk about how even in that you sort of hit a wall and had to take a step back. Talk to us about that, when that happened.
Yeah. So I, you know, over the course of my grad school years and then after grad school, I was heading in the right direction. I was meditating very frequently. I had pretty much removed alcohol from my life. After grad school, I got a teacher's certification in meditation. I was teaching meditation mostly to like business leaders, since I had done an MBA program. I was teaching some veterans, and I was working on a small business with my brother. I was living in my hometown. So all of these kind of well-being activities, you could say, I was doing. I had good community. I had a good support system. The work was meaningful to me. It was in alignment with me, and I had good practices. And then I had been deferring a job offer with McKinsey and Company, and I got to another deferral period to work, and you know, had to go, you know, speak with them about the possibility of me deferring for another year, so I could continue working on this business with my brother. And they were like, no, Neil, we think you're great, but we're not going to be your permanent backup plan. And I mean, that made sense to me. So I ended up going. I had always wanted to see behind the curtain. And then, you know, I got there, and, you know, part of me loved it. It was really intellectually stimulating. It was kind of cool. You know, I'm a lower middle class kid from Frederick, Maryland. So riding in first class and being in boardrooms in your early 30s is cool. And I got to kind of co-lead the internal mindfulness program, which was something I was really proud of as well, and got a lot out of. However, that was certainly the beginning of when my mental health started sliding back the other way. And even though I had like a good foundation, what I've realized now since is that environment really matters. Alignment in work really matters. You've got to have some support structure, and the environment there was not good for me and my well-being. And I think as well, even though it wasn't top of mind every day for me, the body knows when you are doing work that is not in alignment with kind of who you are and your value system. And there was lots of times I was on projects where I, at the end of the day, didn't believe in what we were doing. And then your body, your central nervous system was trying to give you signals,
Right.
And so I ended up doing that for a few years and slipping backwards a bit in terms of well-being. And then I ended up, I would say, kind of even further off track in terms of purposeful, aligned work. I was doing restructurings for private equity portfolio companies, which can be really sharp elbow, money driven, kind of dehumanizing work. You can make a lot of money doing it, but it's not for me. Right. I lost my way. I kind of slid back into it and got attracted to the shiny things that were around me. And through these years, I was aware of the fact that a lot of my symptoms were coming back, my inability to sleep. I always remember when I was in the service and I was kind of in that, really having the fight or flight issues, PTSD, whatever you want to call it. It's a central nervous system response. I remember feeling rushed when I was brushing my teeth in the morning, because I was in this kind of high alert, and that went away. And then that came back when I was in the corporate world, this constant feeling of being on edge. And then I remember seeing my peers, who many of had never spent a day in the service, but they had the same symptoms, and they were trying to cope the same way. They were drinking more alcohol, they were taking anti-anxiety medications, and they get in this cycle that I had been in, but were from just, experiences in the corporate world. And I did that. And again, I would say I got to my second kind of low point in my life. I guess I needed another series of lessons to really get it into my thick head. But I ended up with like a very fancy title and pretty high income for my age, and miserable. So I was like, I've got to do something different. And I ended up leaving a few years ago now. And I had always known, I'd always been really passionate about meditation, even though my personal practice had kind of waxed and waned over the years, and had always been fascinated by psychedelics and consciousness and spirituality and all of these things that are changing around us right now. And, I kind of, this project with Beckley has just come together quite organically, which I think is a good signal that I'm back on track doing work that I should be doing.
Yeah. I mean, wow. I think so many of our listeners probably see themselves in part of that story that you just shared. I know that parts of it are resonating with me. And, even from the toothbrushing thing, it's like, okay, 2 minutes, like, all right, I can't just be brushing my teeth for this 2 minutes. Like, that's not efficient. Let me do squats while I'm brushing my teeth, and it's like, right, this pressure to be hyper productive, not understanding, right, like the most productivity comes from like a relaxed, calm state. And, we fight against each other, against ourselves so much. And so, okay, I'm a listener. I just heard your story and I'm like, wow, Neil, it sounds like you're reading my diary. What can we do? Psychedelics aren't legal, right? I mean, I think that's the conception. How do I know which one's right for me? Is that the first step to take? What do you tell someone who might be experiencing some of those symptoms and looking at the wrong types of medication? Medication that might be masking instead of healing. Making those distinctions.
Yeah, I think you've got to think you got to look the body, it's an ecosystem, right? And I think in a lot of times traditional Western medicine, we get a bit myopic. So it's like we have a problem with our heart, and they just look at the heart. Right. But everything works together. And I do believe that, we have a mind, we have a body, we have a heart, we have a spirit. folks are probably familiar with similar frameworks to that to think about holistic well-being. And I think you got to do a bit of an honest assessment with yourself and ask those questions like, am I well? What's my legacy going to be? How are my relationships? Am I really happy? Do I believe in what I'm doing? And if, if those answers are no, then I think it's a shame to not take some steps to make some real change. Right. The problem sometimes is there's so much momentum, and I think it's really easy to get stuck in these career paths that aren't fulfilling, aren't aligned, but pay relatively well, kind of keep the ego a bit inflated, and you can just hang out there. But if any of what we're talking about is like stirring something in you, that's a signal. If your body, tune into the body, listen to the body will tell you, if you need to make some change. And then, I think that a lot of times, in the modern way of thinking, it's always, can we add, like what do we need, what needs to be added? And a lot of time I think with well-being, it's, what needs to be removed. And I mean, if you're in these dreaded cycles of the uppers in the morning and the downers in the evening, the coffee to get you going and the alcohol to settle you down, or you replace that for whatever prescription meds or over-the-counter meds you want. I mean, it's so common, figuring out a way to kind of do the basics and remove some of those stressors on the central nervous system. Because at the end of the day, I think a big part of what we're doing is at that subconscious body central nervous system level. And most of us are in some part of, are in fight or flight to some degree or one or another. And when you're in fight or flight, and you're more sympathetic dominant, it is really hard for the brain to function at the higher level, to be more creative, to be more empathetic, to connect at a heart level with other humans, because you're more in a stress response, you're more in a protective mode, right? It's a state of being. And so, thinking about ways to get the central nervous system settled down so that the body can actually do what it really does well, which is repair itself. But if you're putting a lot of stimulus into the body, frequently, it's hard for the central nervous system to settle. And, the best things I found for central nervous system is meditation. So I think that sometimes meditation gets bucketed together with all of this like list of well-being things. Mm-hmm. I'd argue that it probably needs to be pulled out, and it's kind of foundational. So I would say it's really important to start there, and it's not easy. And, most things that are worth it aren't. But, developing a practice where you're spending a bit of time meditating and do that for a consistent period of time, I think that you'll notice some benefit. And then, psychedelics, I think, can be an incredible tool. They can be very powerful. Most of them are very, very safe. I mean, psilocybin, for instance, it's non-toxic. It looks like it's actually neuroregenerative, so it actually heals the brain, relative to alcohol or tobacco or you name it, common other drugs. It's exceptionally safe. Yeah. And I find sometimes we get into these modes, and then and it's hard to kind of like take a step back and reflect and ask those questions and be honest with ourselves. And a lot of times it'll take some tragedy or crisis in someone's life. Like I hit a rock bottom, and that's kind of what I needed. A lot of times people will have some major health issue or heart attack, or they'll have a divorce, and it'll be this moment where they're like, oh, what am I doing? Like, why am I living this way? Right. And then from there's like this motivation to make real change because there's been some crisis. Right. Well, I feel like psychedelics, when used in the right way, can be that same level of wake up call without all the pain and all the trauma. It can be that sometimes to fix something or to get something to make change, you got to shake it a little bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
You got to, wake it up. And that's what these plants can do when they're used in the right way.
Amazing. I love that you kind of, that's what I wanted to get to is like, okay, how do these plants and this plant medicine do what alcohol and these stimulants and depressors and the prescription drugs can't do? And, I like the way that you put it. It's kind of that wake up call and allows you, well, how would you describe it? Kind of if you're experiencing the medicine, what is it showing you that allows you to adjust those behaviors, or what's happening?
Yeah. And we don't fully understand. I mean, like with most medicine, even with like SSRIs and stuff that's been around for, we don't really understand like the mechanics. Like we can't draw a straight line. They can, people theorize around what is happening. And it looks like, with psilocybin, for instance, it's making the brain more malleable or more plastic, more flexible to change. And so that's really powerful because, by the time you get to be middle-aged, a lot of how you show up in the world is these deeply ingrained emotional and mental subconscious kind of patterns that start from the childhood, and they get worn in. And by the time you're around our age, it's hard to change those patterns. They're deep, and you've been working on it for years. And there's a metaphor that I do think is pretty appropriate to use, is like if you think about a ski slope, and skiers going down, they go down these paths and they wear these paths in, and after a while that the lines are pretty clear where you go, and you're stuck. And what psychedelics can do, again, when used in the right way, is it's like a fresh lay of snow. And if you do the work, if you come out there mindlessly, you'll go right back in the old tracks.
Yeah.
But you can now, because the brain is in this more plastic state, if you're conscious about it and you do the practices, you can actually lay in new tracks. So you can start fresh.
Right.
And I mean, that's why they're so powerful for these like long-term relationships too, like with your spouse or partner or mom, dad, or brother, sister. So much of that, both sides have these ruts worn.
Yeah.
And so it's really hard to change those relationships because they're so deep, where you can give people these experiences, and it is a bit of a clean slate in some sense.
Wow. I love that you hit on that. There's so much. So, we're kind of going in, and it gives you that clean slate, but like we hear almost every guest over and over again are warning of it. I've heard you make kind of the same warnings, that it's not a magic pill, right? It's not that, oh, you're going to go and take this medicine, like with anything, right? And all of a sudden you're going to be this new, new version of yourself. It's what you said, right? You've got a fresh blanket of snow. It's a clean landscape. Now, what you do with that fresh snow, right, is what makes all the difference. Mm-hmm. And I think, jumping into your current position at Beckley and what you guys are doing with that program, I think is so important, because you talked about meditation. How many of us, are just don't have a steady meditation practice, yet feel like we want to experience the healing that comes with some of these psychedelics and comes with psilocybin. And what you guys are doing is creating this program before you go to the retreat. So talk to us about that. Like, right, if someone's interested and they're saying like, okay, everything that you're saying is resonating with me, but I'm still hesitant because I'm not meditating. I have never tried these psychedelics, but you guys have created a way to ease people into the program.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's one thing that we're trying to do differently, because we believe it'll lead to better kind of long-term outcomes, more lasting change, and more generally, meaningful and positive experiences. I think that there's lots of centers, retreat locations out there where you can kind of go have these mystical experiences. And, I think I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with that. I think you want to be safe. You want to know where you're going. You want to know the quality of the guides. You want to know where the different plants and stuff are coming from. But, I don't think it's like a huge risk. But I do think you're leaving a lot on the table. Like, you're you're having this experience that you could get a lot out of if you did some of the preparatory work and you did some of the follow-up work. So you make the most out of it, I guess I would say. And for ours, we start 4 weeks prior digitally. And, in those 4 weeks, we one of the important things is starting the group dynamic. So all of our programs are done in cohorts. It's like 15 to 20 people. There's some really, clear research around that maybe this work is better done in groups, which is not shocking to me. I don't think it'd be shocking to anyone else that there is some disconnection that we're trying to, mediate through these programs too, and get people to be able to connect with others on a deeper and more meaningful level. So we start that early. Mm-hmm. And then we teach people the basics around meditation and breathwork exercises. And, our programs are, research informed, research based with a Western psychotherapy lens. So, we use those different frameworks to get people to do the self-reflection exercises and intention setting. Yeah. It's like, why are we doing this? Okay. And kind of get clear on that. And then, we encourage people to do the things that'll help get the central nervous system more settled in. So those cycles around, the uppers and the downers and you got to be mindful about what you put in your mind, and what you put in your body. So we encourage people and help people. And, the group approach, I think is really good because it's easier to flake on yourself. You know what I mean? Totally. Doing things in groups where there's a little bit of accountability and a little bit of feeling like, hey, we're in this together and we're going to kind of work on this stuff as a team makes a very meaningful difference too.
Yeah. And I love that you give the opportunity to meet those people ahead of time. That's some people have a level of anxiety around, right, meeting new people. For sure. And you feel like you're going to go through this huge, intimate, life-changing experience with total strangers. So I think that's such an important thing that you guys are introducing and creating some of that group dynamic before the actual, treatment and ceremonies begin. I want to take it back because you mentioned that you're right. A lot of these grooves in our mindsets and these hard worn patterns that we experience happen mostly between our very intimate relationships. So the parent-child relationship, your spousal relationship, but there's some medications where they're saying it's best experienced by yourself, not with your family. Would you say the same for psilocybin, or are the Beckley Retreats, is that an experience that I could go on with my mother and we could go on this healing journey together at the same time?
Yeah, I think there's definitely some value in both sides doing some of this initial self-exploration and work on your own, right? It's like kind of look inside first and fix that on, with that said, no question, these types of experiences can be extremely transformative for those relationships, but it's hard to say for each and every relationship, is the time right, and I think that if you're already seeing someone, a professional, in that relationship, that you should speak with them. But if you feel really, both sides feel really called towards it, I've seen it be a complete pivot point in romantic relationships, father-son relationships, mother-daughter relationships. It can be incredibly powerful.
So,
but here's the thing with relationships too, is you got to be careful. If you're in this mode where you're like, all I got to do is get that person down there and that's going to fix them, then the mindset's not right. Like we can't look at these experiences as magic pills, and we certainly can't think we need to go fix everybody with them, right? Then the mindset needs a bit of shift.
Totally. And I think, you hit on an important use, right? Because right now I think that the context that people think of psychedelics is, oh, I've got a babysitter Saturday night, honey, let's go. Do you know what I mean? Try some magic mushrooms. And you spoke a little bit of that. And, if it's, I think I heard you do another interview and you were saying, you might be, down in Jamaica and you see somebody at the bar Friday night the next morning they're participating in psychedelic ceremonies and they're back at the bar on Sunday because it's their vacation and it's just one more experience for them, another thrill. But that's not the true, like you said, you're not maximizing your experience. You're not taking out the benefits, right?
Right. You're right. You're you're going to leave a lot on the table. And I think that, and I do think look, psychedelics, I think generally are like very incredibly safe. I think that there's an argument that they're a human right and that, we've been way over, regulated in the last years. And it really is just a public perception issue around these things. These things are incredibly safe. With that said, there is still some risk. And, particularly if you have history of like severe mental illness, or previous suicidal ideations or, like inpatient mental health care, right. You have to be quite cautious here. Right. But that's for a very, very small portion of the population. And then, outside of that, they are quite safe.
So then so someone goes through the program, they're doing it the right way. They choose to go through, a formal program like what you're doing at Beckley Retreats. And now they're going back home. 2 questions. How are they supported post-experience? And how can they apply those skills? How can then they take this new learning or whatever might happen on this kind of retreat experience and apply that to their life, to their work, to their daily lives?
Yeah, so we have a 6-week program after it, which is digital. So, we get the group, continue to keep the group together. By this point, there's usually some really quite strong bonds there. So it's really beneficial to keep that going. And then we have a rewiring program, which is, again, Western kind of psychotherapy informed, research based, which is getting you to do the exercises and the practices to kind of lay in those new tracks. And then we're also encouraging just kind of lifestyle changes, right, around well-being. Getting in nature is important. If your job is a nightmare, then you can't necessarily maybe leave the next day, but start thinking about how to make a shift to something that's going to fill you up instead of break you down. And so we have 6 weeks of kind of like a very formal, I would say very like kind of professional, well-run integration program. And then, we're building this out, but we're trying to create some long-term community for folks that want to, be part of that. Because it can be a bit jarring. It's like you can have these powerful mystical experiences, completely see the world differently and be like, very significant kind of changes in how you perceive things. And you go back into your work life and nobody's talking about, connectedness or well-being. It's more about money and, climbing the corporate ladder and things. So it can be a little, unsettling, I guess you could say, right? Because now you're aware, and then, it can be a bit jarring. And so, we're working to be able to build community around these experiences so folks can continue to support each other and meditate together, or get in nature together, or, go to different kind of events and that are supportive of this new way of being instead of going back to their old ways of, maybe it's the bars and dinner and drinks and the
right. And
the
it's
city
not
life.
saying, we're not saying, okay, if you hate your life and things aren't going well, come down to Jamaica, try psilocybin and start again. And we're not saying that you have to quit your job after you experience the medicine, right? It's hey, let's do some, like you said, put that blanket of fresh snow on there so that we don't see those old grooves and patterns. They're not as pronounced. They don't become the default mode. But we have to understand that once you go back, it will take some effort, right? It'll take some conscious choice and decision, but hopefully those decisions are a little bit easier to make because of your new perspective, right? So it makes more sense for you to eat healthier. It makes more sense for you to donate the time. You see, I need the help, right? Donate my time into meditation. Like, right, so backwards. But I think that's really important. I want to touch on if someone's considering trying psilocybin, they're considering going on a retreat. You've pointed out some of those key things that they should probably consider, right? Who are your facilitators going to be? What is sort of the student to teacher ratio, right?
Yeah.
And where's this medicine coming from, and what level of security can you have in your mental, physical, and your mental, emotional, and physical security
Mm-hmm.
during that retreat stay? So thinking about those kind of 4 indicators, can you share with us Beckley's approach to those as far as like student to teacher ratio, the facilitators, where the medicine's coming from, and
Yeah.
security?
Our facilitators, I'd say, are world class, and for our leads, we look for someone that has very clear and demonstrated Western psychotherapy experience and training, because it's an important framework, and honestly, it helps people feel comfortable and safe knowing that our leads have like some formal recognized education. Equally as importantly, though, we try and find these unicorns that have that experience, but then also have meant like years and years, kind of 10 years is our minimum ceremony experience. So leading these types of programs, Lisene's one of our leads. She's done over 1,000, right? And has the Western psychotherapy experience. So she's excellent, right? Like and then we have a team around her that have different skill sets that they bring into the ceremony, into the program, but they're all kind of experts in their craft, right? They're not, this isn't their, they're not just getting into this work. They've been doing this work, and that we find that to be important. And then on the, facilitator to participant ratio, our programs are usually around 15 to 20 people, and we have 5 to 6 facilitators. So it's like a pretty high or pretty, good ratio of participants to facilitators. So everybody is getting kind of the attention they need and the support they need. We find that's, we don't like going less than that. And then on the, like, where are the plants coming from? Another important question, particularly if you're doing it someplace where it's not legal and it might be coming through the underground. We get it in Jamaica from, a facility that is legal and, is above board and has permits and tests it, and then we test it. So we're like, we know where it comes from. It's not, and that's the nice thing about having, doing it in a legal location is the government is actually, is helpful in having some of the regulation and some of the checks and balances in place to make sure that things are, safe.
Definitely. I love that. So if everything is kind of resonating with someone and they want to try this and experience it with you and with Beckley Retreats, what are their options? What's the next step that they should take?
Yeah, we actually have a site that it's just Beckley Retreats /nucleus. So we could put it in the chat. Can we chat the group here?
Yep.
And then, people can reach out to me. I love this stuff, right? And my team will probably tell me I need to stop doing this at some point, but I love talking to people about this work and how it's changed my life and the benefits and the risks. And so people can reach out to me. My email is at neil@beckleyretreats.com, or you can get me through LinkedIn. And just go to that nucleus link and click through and go to the site. And that has a lot of good information on it, and kind of like more detail about the programs but just reach out. We'd love to speak with you.
Wonderful. Well, I think this is a great conversation. I hope that we've shifted some mindsets. I know that my mind was shifted and opened a little bit to the possibilities, specifically around, the motivating factors for us to try some of these alternative medicines. And I think sometimes we overlook those causes and just chalk it up to, hey, that's American society, right? We want the high paying job, so these are the consequences that have to go along with it. Shut up and eat your food. Do you know what I mean? And that doesn't have to be that way. Do you know what I mean?
It doesn't.
We really can have it all, and that includes peace of mind and well-being and financial security. Like, we don't have to choose one or the other.
Right. Yeah, it's
and-
balancing that scorecard out. It's
Right.
just a lot of times we over prioritize the money and the prestige when we'd probably be happier if we figured out a way to live a bit more simply and downshifted that career so we had more free time and less stress. It's just there's a lot of momentum out there. It's hard to make those changes.
Oh, wonderful. Well, if you're listening and you liked, what Neil has to say, you can find out more information about him on not only Psychedelic Invest, but on Newly. And I am the head of partnerships at Nucleus Holdings, where we're working to destigmatize the psychedelic industry. And if you are someone who is inside of the psychedelic industry or curious about psychedelics and you want to grow your presence inside of that, I encourage you to make a listing on newly.com, list your organization, list yourself, and we really work as the hub, bringing together therapists, organizations, entrepreneurs, investors, and end users to create and grow this community around psychedelics. So thank you for joining me today, Neil, and helping to shift minds. We'll see you guys again next week for another mind-shifting moment. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.